Welcome to Dwell on These Things, a podcast by Dwell Community Church in Columbus, Ohio, where we hear stories and examples of how God is moving in the church at Dwell and around the world.
Hi there, I'm Scott Risley, and I'll be our host for this episode of Dwell on These Things. As many of you know, it's 2024, big election year. Big election a lot of us have been thinking about. And of course, I'm referring to the eldership election of Brian Runk and Chris Hearty. 2024, they're up for another 3-year term. One of the things people have said is a lot of people in our fellowship know these guys, but we're a big church. We're a church of over 4,000. Some people don't know these guys at all, and we're asking our servant team members to vote on, do you want this person for another 3-year term as an elder? And so we started doing these Meet the Elders episodes just so you guys can kind of get a sense for these guys, who they are, what they're passionate about, their history with God. And so we just wanted to set aside a little time here to talk with these guys. Hope this will help you guys feel a little more connection with them, get to know the leaders in our church a little more. So with that, I'll just ask you guys to maybe just give a short little introduction to yourself, your life situation, your family. I don't know if, Brian, you want to go first?
Yeah, thanks for having us, Scott. Yeah. It's cool we get to do this.
Yeah.
Yeah, so married, wife and 3 kids. My wife, Amanda, she goes by Brownie. She's first home church she came to. There were a couple other Amandas, so they had to give her that nickname.
That was her last name, Brown, right?
Wasn't
hair color.
Yeah, she's
hair color. Oh, okay.
The other Amanda was a blonde.
There was a blonde.
Brown hair. Okay.
Yeah.
Good to clarify that.
And she's a paramedic instructor at Columbus City Fire, and she's sanguine and outgoing, and that gifting of hers helps me as with my melancholy darkness to stay out of that. And she's an amazingly hard worker and just a lover of people. She just loves people. And my oldest son, Warren, is 13. I got a daughter, Charlotte's 12. And my youngest son, Quinn, is almost 11.
Wow.
So we had 3 kids under 3, which that period's a little bit of a fog, I would say. So, but yeah, Charlotte, she's an artist and a servant. And Quinn he's a sporty guy. He's got a lot of neighborhood friends. Loves the school and his neighborhood friends. And Warren, I would say, is outgoing and probably going to be an entrepreneur, something like that.
Okay,
so,
nice.
Yep.
Chris, you want to share a little about yourself there?
Yeah, so I've been married now, I think it's coming up on 16, 17 years. Got married to my beautiful wife, Lauren, and the Lord blessed us with 2 kids. I've got a daughter as my oldest, and then my son. They're 7 and 8 right now. And actually, my wife was discipled by Brownie, Brian's wife, and then I was discipled by Brian. And so there's unique familial connections even there.
Yeah.
But yeah, my kids are in school right now, 1st and 2nd grade, and I just love them to death. They're a huge part of my life, and it's been a real adventure being a parent and learning everything that comes with that over the years. Mm-hmm. And I'm terrified, honestly, if I'm telling the truth, about the next 10 years. But the Lord is the one who's really going to be in charge there. So I get to play a part, and I'm excited to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you guys knew each other long before you guys were elders together. You want to talk a little bit about the history of your relationship, how you guys met?
Yeah, we go back, 20 years now, I'd say.
I met you in 2004.
Yeah.
It was the fall of 2004 was the first time we met.
You kind of hated me, right?
Well, I didn't. I mean, I didn't at first look or something. But you were doing some work with a friend of mine, and I think I kind of resented that.
Doing some work, what do you mean?
Some spiritual, godly work.
Who was that friend?
My buddy, James Rochford.
Okay.
Probably my closest and oldest friend, no doubt.
You guys knew, you and James knew each other back in high school and even before that.
It's a long story. We met when we were I don't know, 8, 9, 10 years old.
Okay.
Played basketball together on a club team, and I got to know him that way. And then turns out he lives right behind me where I grew up, less than a block away or about a block away. And so we became, neighborhood friends and then best friends pretty quickly thereafter. So we've really been probably close, if not best friends, since I was 10 years old.
And so then Brian meets James.
Right. So we moved down, and there's a gap of time there between I was 10 and then I got to Columbus because I had grown up in the Akron-Cleveland area, and at some point we decided we needed to get out of there. We moved down south 2 hours to Columbus, and James was a student at Ohio State, which is where Brian met him. And so they began a friendship, and James would bring Brian over to our house because I lived with James at the time. And so that's how I got to meet Brian. And at first I thought, yeah, okay, cool, the new guy. We didn't know. We had come down with a big group of guys, I don't know, or maybe 10 guys or so. We moved down here together. And so we had a pretty close-knit crew. And so a guy coming in from the outside was a fine change. But then I quickly realized that this guy, Brian, was a Christian. And he was talking to James about Christian stuff and would try to talk to me about that stuff as well. And I wasn't having it at the time. So that's how we first met.
It's pretty funny because, James was, he was catching fire and getting involved, and, you were a very committed pot smoker at the time. And
that's right.
That was definitely a threat. Like, my best friend's going to start following Jesus and ditch me in this life here.
Yep.
And so there's a little tension there, but I think we did a good job. Like, James did a good job of just, let's just be over at your guys' house. Let's just be let's just be, amongst the people. And, I remember, hanging out with you guys, and, you guys would do what you do, and
living our best lives.
just trying to get into your world. And, and I think it was cool because, like years down the road, it was like even our whole home church, I remember we would come over to parties at your guys' house and just really get to know you guys and your friends and some of the other crew there. So
something must have changed. You weren't real happy about this, and now you're an elder.
Things
a few steps between.
I mean, I think
the last 20 years.
Like what shifted there? I mean, how long did that go on for? Did you guys drift apart? Or did you guys?
So not very long. I mean, so I think one thing that I remember is, I think Hearty was really processing, kind of like sensing that some stuff was happening, and but I felt like we hit it off really well, and so there wasn't there wasn't a bunch of drama or anything. No, it was cool. No. And I don't know, there was this one Tuesday or what, I don't even know what day we met for home church, Thursday or Tuesday. Mm-hmm. But I was I was bringing 2 people to home church that night, a girl that I worked with and a guy I had met in class. And we're down on campus, and I literally turn around a corner, and then you're like in front of my face, and I bump into you on campus. And I'm like, hey, dude, what are you doing, man? And it was like, hey, we're going to home church tonight. You want to come? And you're like, yeah, sure. And, and you came out to home church, and it was just like, it just felt like one of those divine appointments where God was like, you need to see him tonight, and he's coming.
Why'd you say yes?
Well, it was definitely a divine appointment. There's no question about that. There's some backstory there that I'll share a little bit of it. So I had known Brian for several months. I don't know, maybe 6 months at that point.
Surely you'd been invited out by that.
I had, and I had gone.
Oh, okay.
I had gone to, I don't know, a couple home church meetings at that time. Not many.
Yeah.
I don't think
one central teaching maybe.
Maybe a central teaching, not much. Less than a handful of times. And I decided, because I wanted to check out this place that my buddy was going to, James. And so I did, and I thought to myself, this isn't my like venue. This isn't the kind of place I hang out. So I stopped coming around through that winter of 2004 into 2005. James, in that meanwhile, had been going out. and had received Christ and had, had his life and eternal destiny changed. Well, he, as a brand new Christian, was trying to talk to me about his experiences back at our house because we lived together. And I was not interested in that. And and that's when I started getting more upset. Like, okay, so you're going to leave what we have here to go and do this other thing. So a number of months had passed. There was steady tension growing in my relationship with James because he was doing great and I was at the lowest point in my life. It was the worst part of my life. Now, I wouldn't say I was an atheist. I had a lot of spiritual interest in a very general sense. I liked thinking philosophically. I liked, judging people from my perspective.
Yeah.
And so I wouldn't say that I didn't believe that a God existed, but I just didn't know. I knew there was something out there. Well, in those days, early 2005, I was becoming more and more interested in that. And, all that time, Brian and his home church guys were coming over, hanging out. We were having conversations. And eventually, sometime, in, I'd say, early April, James and I at home got into a big argument. And at least for us at the time, it was a big argument. And we kind of stormed off in different directions. I left the house. He went to his room. And I didn't find this out till many years later, but he was praying for me and our relationship. Well, when I went out of the house, I had nowhere to go and aimlessly was walking down the street when I ran into Brian coming out of the place where he was. And then he invites me to home church. I have nothing else to do. I have no quick enough excuse to share. And so I went with him. And
was James there when you guys?
Well, when I walk up to the door, there he is. He's standing on the porch, and he couldn't have been more shocked. The way he tells the story's great because he explains. It's like his jaw hit the floor. He couldn't imagine how the heck I showed up there, especially with what had been going on in my life. And I went to that home church, the next, and I never stopped going to home church after that. Sometime within those first couple weeks of going back, I was sitting in a home church teaching, and the teacher gave the gospel and then gave the explanation at the end of the gospel that was very simple, and he just said, and that's how you get to heaven. And a light switch clicked in my head. It's like everything came together perfectly. I went home shortly after that meeting, and I remember sitting in my chair, weeping, just crying just like the worst, baby, like a bad baby cry for hours. And I just remember repeating over and over again in my head, and probably voicing it out loud too. Lord, I was wrong. I need what Jesus died for on the cross to apply to my sin because I am a wretched, miserable, filthy sinner. And so that was it. And that was in April of 2005. And Brian was right there the whole time. He was there for all of that and was able to see that, transformation in my life, and so was James because he could not believe it, that this was going on. And the Lord had clearly done something, what I say it's miraculous. I think he was, the thing I skipped over before, that when James went to his room when he was praying for me after our argument and I stormed out of the house, I found out years later, his prayer was, God, I can't deal with this SOB, referring to me, any longer. Please send somebody else into his life to help him. And that's when I run into this.
So Brian. I got drafted into that messy work, huh?
The Lord plucked you out.
Here I am, Lord, send me.
You're going to deal with this mess. That's right.
Man, I think you guys did an awesome job, just being really faithful to your guys' friends. You guys didn't it wasn't 6 months after you guys jumped into a ministry house or something. You guys actually stayed with your roommates for several years and kind of formed a smaller pod from the roommates who, you were closer with and had more long-term commitment with. And we got those guys out to home church and just, they were a part of the friendship circle. And it was just awesome to see. And then, just instantly praying for your girlfriend back home. And
that's a whole other wrinkle there.
And trying to figure out a path there. And
Your girlfriend back home, who was that?
My wife. My wife and I started dating in, I think it was late 2002, early 2003. And she was finishing her graduate degree at the University of Akron up north. And we stayed dating when I moved down to Columbus. And I honestly, I've thought of this many times over the years. I have no idea why we did that. But I liked her a lot, and she liked me, apparently. She put up with me. And so there was this dynamic that Brian was just describing where we had this large pocket of roommates that had recently moved to Columbus. A number of those guys ended up receiving Christ in the years to come. My wife also, shortly after I had come to Christ, she also came to Christ. I had her come down, she'd come down to visit on when she could. I would bring her out to CT, and I remember one night she was driving back up to her house in Cleveland, and we were praying. We were talking and praying on the phone about the CT teaching we were just at, and she received Christ right there over the phone.
You know what's so incredible is she must have the gift of faith or something, because
She must.
She moved down here. Knowing you and James or whatever, but
But that was it.
Yeah. She moved into a house with girls she didn't know.
Yep.
Just if you're into this God thing and I believe this, I'm just going to go for it. And, that was awesome because she, wasn't she had time to establish herself spiritually and get connected to the women down here and, formed a really good relationship with my wife. And so, just the fact that she moved down here and just threw herself into this, not having, the backlog that you had of just,
She moved right into the girls' ministry
yeah,
house.
it was
She was
insane.
living in there before I was, I think.
Yeah, she was. She was, yeah.
And she met, and by that point, she moved after she graduated from grad school. And
When was that she came down?
It would have been maybe 2006.
Oh, so a full year after.
Yeah, somewhere in
came to
there.
Christ.
Right.
Okay.
And, she moved in with these 18-year-old girls. She was a few years older because she had already finished her master's. So, but she didn't know any of them. She got to know, faces and some names maybe by visiting. But she took a huge step of faith. And,
my wife and I were newly married. And so, she, her coming to our home church was her getting to know a bunch of people she didn't know either.
That's right.
And so it was she's how's God going to provide friends for me? And I was yeah, God had that in mind. So
Sure
was pretty sweet.
Sure did.
Man, it really strikes me. We like to think of evangelism in more horizontal terms, and it's you were definitely in there with these guys, but it's a miracle. When anyone comes to Christ.
So yeah.
It is a supernatural event. It shows the importance of prayer, the importance of praying in faith. And it also shows that sometimes people may seem pretty hostile right before they are about as willing as they could be.
I'm living proof.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, Jesus also said gospel might bring some tension into our relationships. And I think that we got to be okay with that. It's we got to have the integrity to stand on the truth and speak the truth in love. So what a great example. How cool to see then. God still had a even deeper friendship in store for you guys, ministering together. So you guys, you guys have both come on staff here in fellowship. Tell me about you guys. You were working in a secular job and then got called into this. What was that like?
Yeah, you didn't really ask me how I came to Christ or anything, Scott. We just talked about Hearty pretty much, but
well,
that's cool.
His story's even cooler.
Let's pause here. Hold on, let's pause.
No, I just give a little background.
Yeah, let's go back and take a look at that.
My story's not too different. It's obviously a miracle. I myself smoked some pot, but that wasn't it. No,
it's a theme here.
I grew up.
Not a drug.
In a unchurched situation. My grandparents went to church, maybe went a couple times, that kind of thing, But I was definitely a God-fearer, I would say. And I had an experience with Christ when I was 12 years old. I got invited to a church with a friend, and I had this experience with Christ. But there was no follow-up, no grounding, no Bible study, no Bible knowledge. And I was in Columbus City schools, and there was a lot of stuff going around. And before I knew it, when I was pretty young, 7th and 8th grade, I started spiraling. got wrapped up in drugs and crime, got alienated from my parents, was in and out of group homes and running away. And yeah, it was a pretty mixed up kid. Anyways, when I hit, rock bottom, God did some miraculous things in my life. And, he sent some people to me, and I went to a Xenos meeting at the warehouse, actually. It was a high school meeting. It was the first one ever.
Who did he send to you? How did he send people to you?
It was weird. It wasn't like necessarily like they were reaching out to me. It was like just high school shenanigans, One friend was actually a fellow druggie friend, and I was still kind of in the midst of that whole life. And I was actually homeless the first 2 times I came out to a Dwell meeting.
Where were you living? Where were you staying?
Just house to house, like
just
campus houses,
okay.
couch surfing, stuff like that. And we went to this meeting, and I was like, "There's no way I'm going inside this building." And so I just was like, "I'm sitting out here." So they went in, and I sat outside and smoked cigarettes, and it's like, if I go in there, God's gonna strike me down, or the truth's gonna come out, and they're gonna be like, "Sinner," and I'll be exposed. It's like, I can't go in there with all these good people. This is crazy. So anyways, God also sent me, my caseworker from Children's Services was this guy named Steve Churchill, who's a longtime Dwell member, just a really awesome, relational, faithful guy. And he followed up with me when I kind of got through some court stuff and got back in with my parents and was sort of trying to figure out what I do here. And he got in with me, and he was the first one to share with me grace and eternal security. And at first I just couldn't even believe it. I was like, "There's no way this can be true. Like I have crossed too many lines. I have gone too far." And then finally, I did go into the meetings. I told him, I was like, "I'm going out to this church thing." And he's like, "Oh yeah, that's my church." I was like, "Okay, God must be doing something here." So I finally went into the meetings and heard the word of God. I mean, preached with power. Guys like Tom Dixon and Gordy and all these awesome teachers. Fox and these guys, and the Holy Spirit was just on me. Like God has grace for you, and His forgiveness is true, and you can reach out to Him. And I called out to Him for mercy, and grace changed my life. And at that point, I was like, I'm going to tell everyone I can about this. And so I did, It's like, I don't know how old, 15 years old, 15, 16. And, I'm talking to 70-year-old neighbors about Jesus. And I'm, awesome. Talking to my bosses at work, and just, got to let people know how incredible it is to know a God who could forgive a sinner.
Wow.
And so, I caught fire for the Lord. And I definitely had, I backslid and had problems. In fact, I dropped out of school, and literally all I did was read the Bible, get Dwell teaching tapes, recorded teaching tapes, and listen to teachings. I read one of the first books I ever read, because I wasn't a reader. I didn't have much of an education. I read Faith That Makes Sense, and I, read it took me about an hour to read a page and process it. You know what I mean? I was burnt out, but I also was just hadn't read much, so I was just trying to get my life together. So I kind of dropped out of everything, and even school, because I was like, if I go back, I'm just gonna fall into the same crowd and the same stuff. And so my education was the Bible, teachings, and trying to get sober, because it had been about 3 years of a drug addiction. And so I just focused on getting sober. So I'd go up to the study center and, get teaching tapes and study there. I'd go to, down to Hound Dogs or the Blue Danube, and I'd drink coffee and smoke cigarettes and read. And finally got to a place where I could get sobered up and clear-headed. And then God was just pouring revelation upon revelation about my life, about His truth, and about the Word that just, I just caught fire for the Lord, and had a great discipler, Danny Walker, who mentored me and helped me along in the Lord and stuck with me through some tough stuff. So, it's a little bit about my background. So,
wow. Jesus said, "Whoever sins is a slave to sin, but you'll know the truth, and the truth will set you free." That's right. Sounds like the Lord started piecing your mind back together, your soul back together.
Yep. Took a little time. I still have some effects.
We're all a work in progress, though, aren't we?
All work in progress.
Yeah, that's right.
So you guys ended up on staff here. You guys both you lead Spheres. You want to kind of tell us about that process and about what you're doing now for the church, what you do for your ministry here?
Yeah. Why don't you go on this one,
All
Hearty?
I was working in the world, and I had a decent job, for early in my early 20s. I had gone to school off and on. I had started college up at the University of Akron, was there for a year or two before I moved down here. And when I moved to Columbus, I wasn't real set on going back to school, at least right away. So I got lucky in some ways, ended up getting a pretty decent job actually through a guy in fellowship. And I was fine doing that. I was going to Columbus State, taking classes, just kind of paying for that with the money that I was earning at this job, a class at a time or a couple classes at a time. Then I would take some time off, work, save up money, go back and repeat, but without any real direction, without any real reason to why I should go to school. I've always really been to my own fault many times, a little rebellious, you could say. And so the idea that I was just going to follow some program was really unattractive to me. So I wanted to have a reason for why it was important. And at that time, I was so immature that I couldn't think past, my nose. So eventually, after having come to Christ, I'm working at this job in the world, and I started working a second job with Luke Walker, doing car mechanic work. And Luke kind of took me on, I'm sure, as a charity case because I was pretty ignorant, learned a lot when I was there, and ended up, it's become a love in my life working on cars, but more as a hobby than as a career. Those are very different things.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So eventually it got to the point where I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I was happy working with Luke. I was happy with the other job somewhat. And so I pulled Luke Walker aside and I said, man, this is the situation I'm in. I don't know if you want me to keep working for you. I'd love to. I love working with you. But if I go back to school, I'm not gonna have time to be able to keep, 2 jobs in school and so forth. Should I finish? I got a couple more years before I can get my bachelor's. And he said something to me that changed my life. And I don't know where he got this from. I have no idea why he said this, but he looked me dead in the eye and he said, man, I really love working with you. And if you want to stay here, I've got work for you. But I wonder if the Lord wants you to go back to school and get your degree and maybe you could work for the church one day. And that's the first time anyone had ever said that to me.
Wow.
I had asked, I actually early on, maybe, a 6-month-old believer in the church, I had tried to ask staff members if they could get me a job at the church, which it never panned out at that point. But, that's something I wanted to do because the thing I was passionate about, the thing I loved was doing ministry and everything that comes with being a new child of God. And that changed my life. That's all I cared about. I didn't want to do anything else. That was part of my motivation problem. And the Lord knew that. He knew deep in my heart that there's probably nothing else that I would enjoy or nothing else that I would have any meaning in my life, the way I was kind of wired. So when Luke said that to me, my heart, dropped right to the floor, and I knew it was a word from the Lord. I knew God had spoken through him into my heart. Now, the funny thing is, a couple of years later, I was catching up with him, and I said, "Hey, man, you remember that conversation?" He had no memory of it.
Of course.
He had no idea. It was maybe the most pivotal conversation of my life after coming to Christ. And so I went back to school, and I finished up at Ohio State. Like I said, I only had a couple years left to do, and I did that. Got out of school, and Conrad hired me on as a part-time coach in his sphere. I had some decent home church work and personal ministry work and discipleship and raising up some guys and planting some home churches. And so he hired me on as a sphere coach. And I remember I trained, my first couple times training as a coach, I was with Ruth because she was coaching for him in those days. That was before she had left. And so I learned a little bit from her and then had to figure the rest out, kind of piecemeal along the way. And then eventually, Conrad raised me up and sent me off as a sphere leader. And that's when I started leading my own sphere, and did that for some time, a number of years, until recently, this last year, I transferred to adult ministry, where I kind of I was brought back together with Conrad and Kate, and the three of us lead our sphere together. Before that, when I was in student ministry, I was leading in high school group. I was full-time CT teacher for college ministry, which was a whirlwind and a blast, something I really loved. And so God took these events in my life, these things He knew deep in my heart I wanted to serve Him, and He gave me these opportunities that were, I never would have imagined that He would have given me, opened these doors for me and given me these opportunities. So that's kind of the history of me working for the church.
What's it like leading the sphere with Kate and Conrad?
It's awesome.
Yeah.
I had been out on my own leading the sphere, my sphere in college for I don't know how many years. I think just under 10 years, maybe, 8 or 9 years, something like that.
Yeah.
And that was fine. I have nothing to complain about, but the idea that I could be back with close friends, experienced leaders, seasoned, mature, wise leaders like Kate and Conrad is like, I view it as just an unbelievable privilege. I have the other people I'm leading the sphere with, I totally trust, and I love hearing, their thoughts on things and going to them for wisdom. And so, I love it.
Yeah.
It's great.
Yeah, I think it's kind of cool that, as your sphere, also sort of aged, like there's like a transition where, you're going adult, but also like the people in your sphere, a lot of them are going adult.
That's
Obviously,
right.
some of the younger ones staying in college and stuff. But I think that's really cool to have that sort of continuity of relationship with people that you've been serving and in the yoke with for so many years. I mean, that's something I really appreciate about, the sphere that I lead in is like I have a lot of long-term friends that have, just been in the sphere. And, we were together in college, either leading or in home church together. And now we get to do an adult and raising our kids and, reaching out to other families with young kids together. And it's fun.
Yeah.
Now, Runk, you started with middle school ministry.
Yeah. So I went to OSU, and I won't tell you my major because if I do, you'll probably laugh. But philosophy. But philosophy major at OSU, and after that, I went to work in special education for about 5 years, working with kids on the autism spectrum, which I loved. I mean, it was just such an incredibly meaningful job. Just seeing, we would work with kids that were like as young as 2 years old. Just early diagnosis, and to get them speaking and learning, and doing that early intervention was so crucial. It was a really rewarding job. It was really tough and really exhausting.
How'd they do with Aristotle and Plato?
Yeah, seriously, yeah, right. But we first couple of years, man, I felt like I was sick every day. Just kids are so disgusting and filthy. And, just being in a school, I was just sick all the time. And I was newly married. Like I literally just graduated college, got a full-time job, newly married, and we just planted a new home church. And I was still kind of somewhat in high school ministry at the time. And I got this job where I was sick all the time and totally exhausted.
Yeah.
Because it was really hard work. And so it was like, welcome to the new phase of life, But it was like, God provided so much during those years. I mean, those first few years of marriage. And we had a great team. I was still in group with Hearty and Rochford, and we had Jake and Laura Stoddard there. And so we just had an awesome home church when I first got married. And Laura was just so great for my wife because she had joined our home church and stuff. So anyways, I worked in special ed for about 5 years. And during that time, I was kind of like, do I need to go back and get a master's? And like I'd applied and started actually working on my master's. And then the job for the director of junior high ministry opened up. And Conrad was like, hey, you should consider applying for this job. It's funny, Conrad hired you too.
He's good.
Thank you, Conrad.
Stuff. Yep.
You get some credit here.
Yeah.
A little bit. But so what was interesting is I had been like, for about 2 years, like talking to my wife about maybe I'll get a job in youth ministry at some other church, but still be in our church. And maybe a church that's like a non-believing church, like, apostate church or liberal church or something. And I'll go in there and get the youth ministry job and teach the gospel. And so I'll get paid to,
It's a good way to get fired in one of those churches, teaching the Bible.
Probably get fired, but like, hey, I just like, I want to do youth ministry. I had this growing burden for like a couple of years. And it's just like, it's not like there's job openings every day for being a youth minister. And then the one was open and Conrad's like, you should apply. And I did. And, man, that was such a blessing. I did junior high ministry for 7 years and, got to mentor students, got to teach and lead. During that time, have 3 kids.
Yeah.
And, go on missions trips with junior high kids, go to camp when I first started, it was like 11 days of junior high camp because there's 3 camps, in a row. Because each grade was so big, and the camp we were in,
Camp Ohio,
was small. So yeah, it was like a crazy time, and man, I loved it. I loved every bit of it.
And you knocked it out of the park too. Yeah, that ministry grew by leaps and bounds under your leadership.
Lord is good, and He is good, and man. So, anyways, so eventually. I guess Ryan was secretly drafting me into adult ministry. Like, hey, you should maybe do some adult ministry coaching. And, so I started doing that in Mike Wood's sphere and had a great time connecting with him and a lot of the leaders in that sphere. And just kind of on the side while I'm doing junior high ministry, doing some coaching. And slowly started moving more and more into adult ministry coaching. And I think it was good. I mean, I missed junior high in a lot of ways. I think it was, oftentimes more physically laborious. Yeah. And maybe adult ministry is a little more complicated sometime and mentally laborious. But so there's, there's the trade-offs there,
You're back in a middle school group too with your
and I'm
son,
back in
right?
middle school now. I've got 2 boys, and so I'm back in middle school.
That's
Actually,
right, they're both in that group.
They're both in the group. Yeah.
Wow.
And and so it's really fun. It's nice not being the director too, and just being a leader of a group, and having a lot of those other things covered, and just it's different being a parent, parent leader than before.
Yeah. I mean, you guys are both parents. How do you guys balance? You've got demanding ministry. You're a husband. You're a father. How do you balance that? What's your advice for? I mean, there's a lot of people in this situation here, trying to make that balance. Like what? How do you do it? And what have you learned? And what wisdom could you share with others?
Boy, I'm not sure I have anything profound to say, other than, well, this isn't profound, but to acknowledge the fact that it's not easy. It's tough. You want to raise spiritual children. You want to raise a spiritual, lead in a spiritual household. Love your spouse. Devote the proper amount of time that you need to your spouse, and in my case, to love my wife the way that she deserves, and my kids, and then at the same time oversee a number of home churches in leading a sphere, and then as an elder overseeing the whole church and being concerned about every one of those churches, and the time in prayer that's required there, and the meeting with different leaders. See, it would be tedious if I didn't love it so much. And it would maybe even be overwhelming if I thought this was something the Lord didn't want me to do. But the fact that God has placed me in this role, and this wasn't something that I was petitioning for and trying to get myself in this role. God literally plucked me out of the gutter and trained me and equipped me, and opened doors for me to lead His church. And so the way I see that is, if God has given me these responsibilities, He must have a reason for that. And my ability, when I try to evaluate my own abilities, I usually feel pretty inadequate. Like, how could I ever do a good job in these areas? And then I remember my most favorite pithy phrase, which is, it's not about your ability, it's about your availability to God. And so trying to remain as available to God as possible through my time with Him, and all of the resources that He's surrounded me with friendships, and those are the things if He's put me in the role, then He's also going to be right there to help make sure that I can function in it, and hopefully thrive in it. And so I think that if I was maybe not making the most of the opportunities He was giving me to get built up in my own life, or to be encouraged, or to be corrected, or to be admonished in some way. If I was avoiding those opportunities, there's no way I could do these things. But he provides every step along the way.
I think some people feel like, I'm really tired, there must be something wrong. And I think it helps to just know it is hard. And there will be tiring times, and you got to have those convictions. Like we don't do it because this is something I picked for myself, but we do it because this is being faithful to God.
That's right.
And you got to be faithful to Him and depend on Him too. I thought that was interesting what you're saying there. The need to depend on Him, and He supplies the strength.
That's right. And it's not the thing that comes to mind with this is when all of Jesus's disciples left Him and went. They had heard enough, and the Lord turns to Peter and He says, "Are you going to leave too?" And Peter says, "Where else would we go? You have the words of eternal life." And I truly feel that way when it comes to the ministry God's given me and the work, the short time that I have here. 10,000 years into eternity, I'm not going to look back and say, "Wow, I wish I had spent more time, polishing my boat." I'm going to wish I had given more time to what God wants me to do. And so, that's my perspective.
Yeah, it's a busy time in life. It's busy with little kids. When they get older, sometimes in a lot of ways it's even busier because they got more extracurricular activities.
Yep.
They've got friendships where they gotta drive them to so and so's friend's house to hang out or that kind of stuff. They've got more involvement in youth ministry, so yours are a little younger than mine. It actually gets even busier when they get a little bit older.
I believe it.
I think that's just like a struggle and a challenge that everybody in our church who's in that phase of life goes through,
right?
Regardless if you work for the church or not. I think that definitely trying to live a simple lifestyle is helpful. We tried to do that when my kids were little and my wife was able to stay at home barely. She had a little side hustle stuff going on. She'd pick stuff off the curb and sell it and stuff. And we'd take the kids out in the van and we'd try to figure out how to get some extra change.
Trash my kids.
I mean, no shame in her game. I mean, her dad taught her the way. Thrift store shopping, all that kind of stuff.
That's very Proverbs 31.
Yeah, totally. You got to do it. And I think living simply. I feel real supported by the church because my wife got an awesome career opportunity to go back to work full time. And we were just like, we can't both work full time. Like, what about getting the kids to and from school and dinner, and just laundry and just like there's so much to do. And, I came to the elders and said, hey, can I work part time? Can I cut everything out, LTC and seminary and just everything I had with my hours and just go to, part time so that I can help around the house so that I can, or we're not totally being crazy. And they were like, yeah. And so felt super supported by that because I was able to support my wife and then also stay in the sphere coaching role. And that's, all I'm focused on now. And it's helpful for our family, that flexibility. Whereas, I can see if we were both full time, I mean, it would be a total scramble every day,
right.
after work and stuff like that. And, obviously some people have to do that and everybody's in a different situation. And we're not, but I think that our culture is busy and our lives are already busy and we're in a busy church and we're in a busy church for a reason, right? We're in a busy church because we have a great commission, right? And we want to make disciples, and we want to be involved in community. And that's already a lot of sacrifice there. And I wouldn't want it any other way. But to do that with sustenance, I mean, we really have to think about, our lives and our time investment and, how much we're willing to just, where we set the boundaries and parameters for our family life. And so I feel really blessed by that stuff. And, and I would say too, just in terms of keeping it together spiritually and stuff and balancing all that stuff. I mean, having a good input in your life, like having a band of brothers is huge. I feel like I've definitely got that with guys I work with, but then outside of that, my guys in my home church, willing to rock the boat with me personally, and that's weird, like being an elder or a sphere leader in the church. And then, you've got your co-leaders, and it's like, you're equal as co-leaders in your group, but in their mind, they could feel like, oh, should I say anything to Runk because about this in his life because he's an elder, and it's like, yes, you should, like, please do so. You know what I mean? And like, and I've got good friends that do that, you know, and that's huge. And then I don't know. The last thing I was thinking about was just being close to your spouse.
Yeah,
is huge, and like, I feel like the closer I am to my spouse, the closer I am to God. Like when I'm invested in initiating with Amanda and like being proactive and engaging in prayer and spiritual conversation and just nothing huge, but just making those small steps of initiation, it helps me be closer to God because we're one, you know what I mean? And it's like, that's just huge. And so, yeah, of course we can do a lot better there, but I feel like that's just our central provision that God's given us. And, yeah.
That marriage becomes that bedrock that the family is built upon, that the ministry is built upon, and it's hard to go real far. I mean, Peter goes so far as to say your prayers could be hindered if you don't live with your wife in an understanding way and give her honor. Mm-hmm. And there's a relationship there between our spiritual impact and the marriage. Mm-hmm. So it's we got to keep working on that marriage. And I'm also hearing you saying things like living simply, counterculturally, thinking outside the box for solutions, and also being realistic about what can we actually handle? Like, what do we want our life to be about? And our time spent should match our priorities, should match what's important for us. So some good things to think about there. Well, we should probably wrap up here. I want to thank Brian and Chris for coming on the podcast today. I'd like to thank all of you for tuning in. And if you want more podcasts, Bible teachings, other information, you can check out our website at dwellcc.org.
All right. Thanks.
Thanks, Scott.